Okay, I'm going to make a start now. So a very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andy Pye. I'm from DFA Media, which publishes Drives and Controls and Smart Machines and Factories and other magazines and online publications. I'll be chairing. This is an outside broadcast for me, actually, because I'm down in deepest Sussex cat sitting for a week, and it's absolutely gorgeous down here. So if the bird song is too loud for you, I apologise. I don't think we'll have any other interruptions. And we're going to talk on automation and robotics, and we have a really excellent selection of panelists to speak to you today. I'm going to briefly introduce them and then explain how the day is going to work, and then we'll get on with it. So we have Professor Sam Turner, who is the Chief Technology Officer of the High Value Manufacturing HVM Catapult. We have John Jackson, the Regional Sales Manager for Northern Europe at Cognex. We have Damien Small, Technical Sales and Group Marketing Manager for Rutico. David Gibbs, Product Specialist for Drives and Networks at SMC. And last but very much not least, Bernard Bagley, who's the Head of Robot Sales for General Industry at KUKA. We're going to have a discussion which will, as with all of our presentations, is unscripted, so we don't know exactly where it's going to go, but the skeleton of it is that we're going to talk about the benefits rather than the barriers for automation, how to build the case for investing in automation, and then looking at some of the automation enabling technologies that our panelists are involved in, perhaps with a few case studies. But we may veer off wildly at any time, depending on the questions that you put in our chat and Q&A. I'm sure that everyone's familiar with how to do that on Zoom these days. But if not, if you look at the bottom of your panel, you may have to click more, which is 3 little dots, and you'll have access to chat and Q&A from there. So it doesn't really matter whether you put things in chat and Q&A or Q&A. I'll look at both, but obviously in theory you should put the questions in the Q&A and comments in the chat. You'll also find as we go, our panelists and their colleagues will put in useful information into the chat so that we'll build up a library and sources of information of further investigations that you may want to pursue. We'll run for about 75 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And if we haven't completed all the questions and the chat that we get, then what we'll do is we'll extend the discussion into our Talking Industry LinkedIn page, where we'll all be available for further conversations and answering further questions. And that can go on for a period of weeks in some cases, depending on the topics that are picked up. So that's pretty much it from me. Unusually this time, we're going to have an introductory presentation from Professor Sam Turner, who's going to set the scene for us and tell us all a little bit about the background to automation in the UK and the role that HVM plays in it. So over to you, Sam.
Great, thank you, Andy, and morning, everybody. Great to be with you today and see such a great audience. So briefly, I'll just say a bit about the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. If you don't know us, we're a network of manufacturing innovation centres in the UK, 7 centres across the country, specialising in different manufacturing technologies, supporting a whole range of sectors across the UK, solutions from additive manufacturing to fabrication to machining to composites. But cutting across all those, automation is a key cross-cutting thread in what we do. And we work with industry in factory-like facilities to develop, integrate, demonstrate solutions that can then be deployed. So our mission is really to accelerate and de-risk the deployment of advanced manufacturing solutions. So automation's at the heart of what we do in our network. We've got about 3,500 engineers working, most of those working in automation in some capacity. And interesting subject right now. The last, if we look at what's happened in the last 12, 15 months, particularly from UK, well, COVID is a global perspective, and with also Brexit having an impact from a national perspective. We've seen a real upturn in interest in automation. So just going back just under 12 months ago, we were supporting companies getting back to production, getting back to rate, and looking at how we could achieve rate in an environment where we had COVID working restrictions, and the role of automation in helping to get companies back to producing the same outputs with a smaller staff on site. And automation was providing a huge part of that. And we have seen this data also showing that the UK, they're seeing an uplift in investment in industrial robots. I think 2020, a 5% increase, but that's still only 10% of the investment made in Germany, for example. So we're actually quite way behind the pack in the UK in terms of investment in automation solutions. But it's a huge opportunity to accelerate that. We're seeing some positive moves in that direction. And automation, of course, automation through COVID was partly around productivity, but also about repeatability. And probably seeing huge investments in automation in parts of the world where perhaps the skills to deliver, the manufacturing engineering skills to deliver robust manufacturing processes aren't there. So turning to automation is a way of delivering robustness and repeatability of manufacturing processes. So repeatability is one motivation or benefit to automation. Certainly productivity is a clear benefit as well, and also flexibility. So developing automation systems that mean that we can actually and how that interfaces with the human in the loop to move from maybe down to batch size of one and having rather than people working on the skills of delivering volume batches, but being able to work now on a range of manufacturing components and products coming through. So we're seeing incentives for all of these, not just productivity was probably the driver initially, but repeatability and flexibility be major incentives for companies coming to us looking at automation support and solutions. And often companies need and recognise there's a need for automation, but looking at where is the most appropriate business case is something that is really important to understand. Why do you need to automate rather than just automation is good? And what's your motivation? Where's the opportunity lie? So, automation of manual tasks certainly has been probably a starting point on the shop floor. Automation of inspection is becoming increasingly important. So combining industrial robotics with things like analytics and artificial intelligence. And starting to see automation of things like manufacturing engineering tasks as well. So we have systems that mean we can more rapidly introduce products and solutions to the shop floor. One thing we've been looking at within our Catapult is helping with triage processes to help companies identify what's the most appropriate solution and need for them, signposting to partners or helping to demonstrate and de-risk solutions, and trying to pull together clusters of user groups. So I think it's really important. The peer-to-peer sharing we see is really valuable, seeing where others have addressed problems like the ones that you may have as a company, and the learning from peers as well as technology providers and innovators like ourselves. The UK's got a really healthy technology supply base, actually, over 60 robot providers, over 300 system integrators. We've got the biggest tech sector. If you look at the adjacent digital sector working in fintech and regulatory technology and gaming that could be brought in to put some of the analytics and support behind the hardware and systems we're deploying. So there's many reasons why we're actually well set to accelerate the development of automation in the UK. Skills is really important as well. And sometimes seen as a barrier, but it's actually an opportunity to develop the skills that are coming through. The next generation of workers coming through are much more comfortable with the digital systems and interfaces. And perhaps in many areas, we've missed the generation investment in traditional apprenticeship skills. And whilst that leaves a gap, it's actually an opportunity to bring through a generation much more comfortable. I've worked with companies where actually you've got the apprentices coming through, helping to commission the robot cells. They're natives to this environment, while those who've got the decades of experience are less comfortable. So fusing that experience that maybe coming to the end of the career life cycle with the digital natives coming through, I think is a real good opportunity. Looking at how we can harness and integrate those skills is really important. And also the skills in terms of leadership and looking at how we understand business case for automation and making sure we're connected to the financial institutions that also understand those business cases for investment, maybe in the venture capitalists to help to accelerate new technology onto the market as well. So some great examples we're seeing in development of new solutions from our partners here on the panel with me, and some of the kind of the small tech startups, and some fantastic examples of innovation over the last year or so in particular, driven by the needs of the pressures we've all faced in the manufacturing world in the last year or so. So looking forward to sharing some of those with you and with fellow panel members and getting into a really exciting discussion.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's a really good introduction, Sam. And I've already covered a sheet of paper with thoughts and comments. So I'm sure we're going to have more than enough to talk about. Before I go on to that, can I just quickly say to Matt, who has raised his hand, we are in a webinar, not a meeting, so I can't see any raised hands, and we're in listen-only mode. So the way to communicate with us live is to use the chat and the Q&A. So if you can do that, we'll certainly take on board anything you want to introduce. Let's have a quick run round the panel on the comment about clusters and user groups. I was quite fascinated by that, and I have seen in the past, you know, the way perhaps one large company can help with extending technology and ideas around through SME communities. Can I quickly ask Sam just to clarify on that, and then he can give his voice a rest, and the rest of you can chip in on that, and indeed anything else that you picked up from the introductory presentation. So just half a minute on that, Sam, and then we'll run around the group. And you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So this is something we're just starting now, actually. We've been running kind of pilots around some of our centres on connecting peer-to-peer use cases. So looking at sometimes just connecting what's the need, what's the perceived need for automation, and then pointing at a comparable company who's already been through that journey, and bringing groups together when we have sort of round table events, having a couple of people in the room who've addressed the challenges that the rest of the group are working on seems to be really powerful. So we're setting up demonstrators that we think address standard industry challenges, which has a value because companies can come and play with that in a safe environment. But there's real value in connecting a company to a like-minded company who's got the same problems and challenges. So we're starting to establish these around our centres distributed around the country, communities, but we're just launching, having run a few pilots. But
okay.
we do find that is the greatest value, is looking at a real peer-to-peer use case of someone who's addressed a problem like yours. It gives the greatest credibility. Then providing the support from the kind of people who've got on the panel here today to see how you can go and do it yourself.
Okay, well let's run around the panel then and ask them if they've got experience of similar types of operations, and also anything that they've picked up from the initial presentation. Let's start with Bernard, because he's top left on my screen for no other reason. And you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute, Bernard. Can't hear you.
Today and the last. So, yeah, I made a few notes when Sam was speaking, and internally we actually have a kind of almost a peer-to-peer system, which is, we call it customer stories. And we're a global business, so we're picking up stories from everywhere to allow new users to see what other integrators and system partners have done with particular applications. So we do that. But one thing springs to mind. I did a presentation recently with some other people, and there's more companies now with the digitalization, like I'll pick one, BotHive, that are starting up, that are completely neutral in terms of supply of equipment, but what they're doing is connecting companies that have a particular problem. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those companies popping out of the woodwork over the coming years. But I mean, we do a lot of work with the catapult centres, and it pays dividends for us. And we channel people in their direction when they've got a specific problem that they need to solve.
And how do people get access to that information? Is it available in formats that they could access?
Yeah, well, we like most other companies are finalising the transition to be completely online. So we have, in our case, it's called my.kuka.com, but it's a completely open portal for our system partners, our customers, and obviously all the internal people. And we're driving everyone in that direction because it's completely open, for anyone to access.
Lovely. Okay. Well, if you could type that into the chat while the others are chatting, then that's our first entry to the chat. I'm a clockwise kind of guy, so I'm going to move to Damien now and ask for his input from Brutico.
Good morning, everyone. Hello there. Yeah, very interesting start, Sam. Thanks for sharing that. I think the only recent example of the kind of clustering and sharing knowledge that I can think of that's probably quite relevant to the COVID pandemic was the recent kind of reach out from the UK government to manufacturing when we had this initial spike of coronavirus and we were struggling with ventilators, and reaching out to industry to try and work with UK manufacturers to provide, you know, products and complete medical equipment to try and help with the ongoing pandemic. So I think that was something that the first time I've kind of seen that really take hold, and I think it was a really interesting initiative. We certainly signed up to see how we could support the UK manufacturers with supply chain and product and services to try and support that initiative. And I believe that, you know, collectively UK manufacturing really came together to try and help out in that crisis. So that's probably the only example I can think of where we've seen that recently, kind of people collaborating to unify for a common goal. Sorry, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. There we go. There's always one. Do you see that as being something that you could replicate for other projects or other crises or in any way? And how would you go about that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a given, Andy. I think we would, the closest that we come to doing something currently along that is we do kind of track and monitor the capabilities and areas of expertise from our system integrator customers. And of course, as we're going around engaging with end users in the UK market, we will often uncover opportunities to recommend integrators that have got certain experience in either product technologies or vertical structures. And certainly we do a lot of referrals, and we have the ability to tap into that UK-wide integrator network and put forward experts in their field for certain applications. So we try and do that. The closest we come to formalizing that is utilizing the Rockwell Automation certified system integrator program, where Rockwell actually publish a number of SIs who are experts in particular technologies and fields, as I said, and we often will put those forward to industry.
Perfect. Well, again, if there's a connection that you could put into the chat to enable people to take that further, that would be perfect. So next is John Jackson from Cognex, who might have a slightly different angle on this, I would think, given that you're specifically looking at sort of machine vision and how that would integrate.
Absolutely. I think from a machine vision perspective, you have, I mean, the technology's been around for a very long time, but there's certain technologies that are newer to the market, for example, deep learning. And I think there what we tend to see with new technologies, there's probably a feeling of conservatism with certain sectors of the market. So what we do is try to really lever against anecdotal success, where other companies have tried and tested that technology. We work hard to really build a vertical application, user stories, and where that's been solved. And certain industries are very good at being the early adopters as well. So, for example, maybe a highly regulated industry where the needs are greater, the payoff might be greater as well. So then we can hopefully use those cases to show and give confidence to other people in that community. And we encourage to talk about applications, also talk about the vertical solutions, and even companies may even productize these solutions. So if we say took a sector like food and beverage, we would say what are the common challenges, what are the macro challenges for food and bev? So it might be packaging defects, it may be challenges like seal inspection, and then what technologies in machine vision could we use to address those specific technologies, and where have they been solved, how have they been solved? And I think Bernard mentioned that we've worked with people like in the Catapult organization as well. So they're taking these complex challenges for maybe an aerospace company on surface inspection, for example, and then trying to solve that with vision technology. and then making that so it's a deployable and repeatable solution where the cost and the integration time becomes shorter as well, because it's not an experimental R&D. It's a proven case. It's a proven use case. So that's what we try to encourage, that that collaboration and work hard to share.
That's a very interesting point you made about common challenges. Looking at a sector, and everybody no doubt has many similar issues that they need to address, which is perfect for bringing people together in clusters. I'll show my age, and I remember one of the buzzwords of 40 years ago was technology transfer, where you actually did the complete opposite. You actually looked at what the commonalities were between, I don't know, telemedicine and aerospace, and what they could learn from each other. Do you find that there's any of that happens as well, or is it very sector specific?
No, absolutely. I think you've hit a point perfectly. And there are often very much transversal, common challenges that an industry might face. So, for example, if you said finding foreign matter in a product that's being manufactured, talking about like packaging is extremely transversal. So you've got the primary, secondary packaging, and then what are the issues associated to if that gets damaged? What's the label condition? Is it in a saleable condition? And does then that apply to other industries? What's the integrity of the seals in that packaging? Does it have, for example, a date on there, a traceability code on there? So there's often a lot of common challenges, and even down to like for example, like surface finish on the material. So like scratches, dents, all these kind of like issues could be common in automotive, but also the same challenges if you're dealing with a metallic part you could find in aerospace as well. So like material-based applications are very, very common as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, David, how would you like to answer the initial approach? And you're on mute as well.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think what we're talking about is a success story, well, isn't it? So sharing a known solution. We at SMC will use success stories. So they can be then internal, if it's maybe something a bit more sensitive where you don't want to be naming particular customers, or we do have solutions advertised on our website as well, where we'll talk about a certain process, as John was saying, and how it can be solved using our products. So for example, EX600 wireless, our wireless valve manifold system, we typically talk about 3 solutions for that. It can be used with robots or cobots to remove the need for a comms cable down the robot arm, which can get breakages and stuff from all the flexing. We also then look at rotary tables, obviously removing the need for slip rings on a rotary table. Another solution might be a tool changer, where you've got a connector that's being made and removed repeatedly. So you've got 3 solution success stories straight away to start promoting that product. But actually, you find you learn from industry, and we're seeing with the wireless that lots of people are starting to use it almost in brownfield sites where they're refurbing a machine. And rather than having to pull cables down the whole machine again, they might save time and wiring by putting wireless devices on it to get their I/O and valve manifolds located around the machine as they need. So yeah, success stories.
Thank you very much. Okay, some of the other things I took from Sam's introduction, and we'll move into the benefits, not the barriers. We agreed that we would try and steer away from the normal direction that a lot of these discussions go in, which is all the reasons why things can't be done. And I remember my very first MD before I became a journalist was in an engineering research organisation, and his definition of an expert was somebody who would tell you how things can't be done. So we decided that we would focus on how things can be done, and Sam picked up repeatability, the ability to do batch sizes down to 1, and improving inspection techniques. So could we ask the other 4 panelists to sort of comment on those, with an eye on how that helps you build the case for investing in automation? And this time I'll start with David. So I've thrown you a curveball, and we'll go the other way round, and then we'll end up with Sam to sort of comment on what he's heard so far. Off you go, David.
Yeah, like you say, so you don't really want to talk about barriers, but every company will have a different issue that you're trying to overcome. The way we look at it at SMC is that we're trying to provide a solution to overcome, whatever the problem is, and not just a component. So we will help to work with them, and we're looking at more than just the parts that we're providing. We're looking for the full solution. Yeah, and we like to talk about, the products have a feature maybe, but you're trying to show the value added from the benefits that feature brings to the customer, and that way you're showing how they can earn get their return on investment from adding automation to their machine, which might be something.
Yeah, how do you actually physically go about doing that? I mean, do you actually help them write down a sort of a sheet of justifying the investment?
Yeah, so we can do value-added reports. So we can make estimates of the time taken to get a return on investment. How much, for example, energy they might save. Improves in throughput. So a common one we're finding, particularly at the moment, is that actually, as other people have suggested, our customers are finding a big uptick in demand now at the moment. And a big problem is that they can't actually get their machines, or OEMs can't get machines out the door quick enough. And often by going to automation, automating their processes, they might have to invest initially for that automation, but longer term, they're getting a better throughput. They're getting more machines out the door, so they're getting more money coming in.
Yep, super. John, do you want to have an input on that one now? We also have a specific question for you, so I'm going to throw that in a minute as well.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Absolutely. Building on what David said, really, we have various tools available for calculating like ROI, for example. I mean, you can have like explicit costs on ROI, like for example, if you were replacing a human quality inspector on a line. So one area that we're seeing a lot of application for is using deep learning to tackle complex anomaly detection, where only really people could do that. But there's reliability issues with human inspection. It might not be 100% inspection as well. So we can calculate the cost of versus labor, and then also there's what's underneath it. There's all those hidden costs like protecting the brand integrity, preventing recalls from getting into the market, and what are the costs for a recall, which is there's the upfront cost, and then there's the brand damage, which is much harder to calculate. And also if we take sort of regulated sectors, for example, like medical device, then the impact for having a faulty product in the marketplace is the ramifications are much wider and much deeper and much more serious as well. So the ROIs can be quite compelling when you start to really go under the surface as well. So they can be those simple to calculate, simple to put on an Excel and work the numbers out. But then also the rich seam around it, where you're really you're helping to protect a company's image and enabling them to really keep high quality products into the market, as well as saving time and money around that.
Yeah, I mean, the issue of image is quite an important one, I suppose. That perhaps we don't give enough attention to how the image of a company is affected by how much quality. Well, we do, but the effect of automation on that is perhaps understated, and I would imagine rather difficult to quantify. Or do you have ways of doing that?
It's very, very subjective to calculate. Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of very high-profile cases in the media where recalls have been very damaging. And you look at automotive, some of the real big household names and the costs and the impacts of their recalls. The effect on future sales as well. So I think it's quite profound if it goes wrong, and it goes wrong in a big way.
Yeah, well said. Okay, just quickly before I move to Damien, who I'm sure is bursting to talk about this, we just had one simple question come in from Lloyd, who just said, how can vision systems play a key role in advanced automation? Well, obviously that's a discussion you need to have with him, which of course you can do. But if you had to answer that in 30 seconds, what would you say?
The key role, so really I would say we want to use vision to help improve product quality, eliminate defects, improve traceability of a product, and reduce defects, eliminate defects that any manufacturer has. That's our mission. We want to do that, and we use the various technologies and tools to do that. So whether it be guidance, measurement, traceability through reading codes, then we've got the toolkit to try and enable that.
Great stuff. Thank you. Okay, Damien, it's your chance to talk around those three areas and anything else that comes to mind.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, no, I think first thing I'd say is obviously we do take a very consultative approach to our customer base, and absolutely want to show the delivery, the ROI that we can help our customers achieve, and usually we take two approaches on that. One would be to demonstrate what the technology advancements can do to help them to make their machine work quicker or reduce waste, become more effective, and the same in a manufacturing capability, to help them basically increase throughput, which results in increased productivity and, more importantly, profitability. But what I would like to pick up on is the point that Sam made about flexibility was particularly interesting for me, because I think, again, we've seen, due to Brexit and due to COVID, we've seen a lot of manufacturers look at diversifying their product lines, and having advanced automation on their product lines has really allowed them to adapt and become agile to moving quickly between. A good example would be, I'm sure we all saw in the media around companies in Scotland that used to produce nice Scotch whiskey for us all, changing to produce hand sanitizer pretty quickly to assist with the pandemic. And I think going forward, manufacturers are going to really need to be able to diversify quickly and adapt at an agile rate. And of course, the modern technologies allow companies to do that. I think the other thing I would just like to add, if I may, is that we also see a trend of customers and manufacturing companies wanting to move quickly to that kind of advanced automation where they're getting analytics to help them make good business decisions. But often they can forget that they've got some quite aging infrastructure on their plants. And one of the first things that we recommend both to end users and machine builders is to either do a machine audit or a network audit to actually look at what you've got as a starting base, because we do see a lot of customers wanting to move fairly quickly to that kind of high-end solution, and often the infrastructure is not sufficient to do that. So doing a recommended kind of site audit and machine audit as a good starting point to see what you're starting with, and then build up from there.
So much there that you've mentioned, and obviously areas that we can explore further. I mean, how critical was it to have automation when they moved from whiskey to hand sanitizer? I consume more hand sanitizer these days than I do whiskey, sadly. But how important would automation have been?
I think to be able to change the recipes in the production lines and look at responding to customer demand quickly. Aging technology would need a lot of re-engineering to do that. I think a lot of the new modern control systems allow you to make changes like that pretty quickly. it's certainly something that I feel if we were to have been facing that pandemic, 30 years ago, it would have been much more challenging with the equipment that was available then to be able to move that quickly. We would be talking, about, constructing complete new lines rather than just adapting recipes or technologies, to change the end product.
What a very good point that is. Yeah, it's just food for thought, isn't it? Okay, so we've made some very important points there about diversification, analytics, and aging infrastructure, which is, I'm sure, something which is common to many of our particular SME base. Bernard, it's your turn to comment on the various aspects that we're
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was thinking about it while the other speakers were talking. I think it's linked to the first question about examples and groups and clusters, because one way to convince somebody that they should do something is to show somebody that it's already been done. Take the fear factor out of the automation, because these days it's everybody's going down the ease of use, simplifying the process. And I think we're no exception. We're all the major automation companies are doing that. And if you factor into that the reason that there's been lack of investment in this, mainly because, and I don't wish to offend anybody, a lot of companies are run by accountants. So it should be relatively easy to demonstrate to an accountant that's running the company that it's cheaper to automate and all the benefits that come with it. And yet there's still, and I'm not being negative, there's still a hesitancy in moving forward. But for sure, linking the fact that you've already done something and taking somebody and showing them, and industry, this country is completely open now. And I think the COVID-19 crisis has been a big wake-up call in many, many ways. But for our manufacturing industry, I think people want to work together now, and they've shown it by repurposing equipment and changing production lines. They're all there and they want to do it. And I think now's the time that we should take advantage of that.
You've got a fine selection of your robots behind you, and very distinctive colour, of course.
Yeah.
How could you comment on repeatability and how you define it and how robotics actually contributes to it?
Yeah, well, this is a conversation you have every day of the week. So the difference between accuracy and repeatability, everyone wants a robot to be accurate, and you have to explain to them, come on, let's talk about your process first. I mean, typically, and we're among the sort of higher level of the repeatability, but a typical robot, let's pick a mid-range, a 150 kilo, is going to have a repeatability, a pose repeatability of somewhere around 0.02 or 0.03. Now that's a very, very, very repeatable process. But if you tell it to go to the wrong place, it'll carry on going to the wrong place. So I think all robots these days, I mean, we typically say our equipment is 99.99% efficient. That's great, until you put something on the end of it and start adding sensors and all the system around it. Now you get into a completely different discussion. But I think all of the people on the panel today, or maybe with the exception of Sam, all of the suppliers, that we're all in the high end of this game. We're not starting out. We work with SMC, we work with Rutico, we work with Cognex, and they all work with us. So I think at the end of the day, the vision side of it, I think, is probably, if I had to pick one out of all of these, the vision side of it is probably the one that's going to make a big difference in the future of automation, because once the robots can see, then you can do so much more with them.
That's an excellent comment, and we'll come back to that, John, because you've got quite a challenge there to live up to. So we'll try to learn before we finish as to what some of the latest vision technologies are able to do. So we've been around the circuit twice, and we're back with Sam. So there's some questions coming in which are divided into, I guess, two categories. Some are quite technical, which we'll deal with further on, and some are more more general in terms of how you approach the automation process. So let's just have a few comments from Sam as what he's heard in response to his opening remarks, and then we'll go into a couple of these questions. You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So really good chat. Lots of ideas churning through as we go in there. There's a lot coming through the chat as well. I mean, a couple of reflections on what we've heard and responses. One thing you mentioned actually, Andy, was technology transfer was the thing 30 odd years ago, and I think that's still really important. It's a big part of what we do actually. We sometimes call it horizontal innovation. We've got great examples of automation developed for aerospace, for example, be that robotics, cooperative robotics, or using things like augmented reality or intelligent tooling systems, and applying that to construction. So that horizontal transfer of technologies is a really important part of what we do, and that can help with the kind of showing the use cases and examples of delivery against common challenges. One thing Dane mentioned earlier when he started talking was around the ventilator challenge.
You've gone mute. Oh.
Sponsor company, so I'm holding the space bar thing. If I let go, not the pressure, it mutes me again. Right. Yeah. So the ventilator challenge. I was working on the ventilator challenge at the startup actually on one of the products that's been developed. And interesting, another example where automation there was where it was brought in was around quality guarantee. So we've got companies from aerospace and automotive largely making medical devices effectively. And whilst there wasn't a huge amount of robotics installed in the time frames, there's quick standard lines. Looking at things like visual inspection were used in some instances, and also using things like augmented reality as a means of helping to train and standardise the operations. So you've got a workforce working on different aerospace or automotive standards, transferring across the medical standards and completely new processes. So some degree of automation is again help that flexibility of kind of refocusing a workforce on new challenges. And often the business case is easier to make on a traditional productivity basis. You're going to save money by saving time, but the business case is much wider. John was talking about visual inspection and the quality guarantees. So you got to make some assumptions there. It's not always as easy to capture. And I think one thing we want to do is help accountants and banks, I think, understand a standardized way of making that business case really easy to invest in. And it can be harder for maybe mid-tier manufacturing companies who don't have the visibility of order book as well and confidence. It's easier perhaps an OEM with long-term outlook on contracts. So there's some kind of certainty around contracts and volume that help to make those investment cases that we need to work on. Yeah, looking at something that's coming through the chat as well. Actually, there's a few questions coming in around R&D, innovation, or is it adoption? And particularly a question around tax credits as well. So, is a broad spectrum of what qualifies as innovation, and we work in that innovation space as the Catapult. So not fundamental research, not industry applicable stuff. But the example of technology transfer, again, that can be innovation, taking something that's been applied somewhere else and developing that for a different application qualifies as innovation. So because the component parts of solutions are available from my co-panelists here on the market, integrating those and applying them to fix your particular problems, I think, is an innovation challenge and qualifies for R&D tax credits as well. So there are things we can do to educate people around how to de-risk a business case and where actually innovation is applicable and R&D tax credits are available as well to drive some of these things forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. One of the questions that I saw, which I thought was quite interesting, was the one on skills, which is how should organisations transition the skills, culture, and knowledge from spanners to keyboards in a way that can enable the advantages of digitisation and automation. Remember, you're talking to a spanner who uses a keyboard, but I don't think that's what he meant. Sam, would you like to just sort of comment on that? It's about the change in the skill sets required. Yeah.
So I think the question is probably about how we translate the existing workforce who aren't digital natives, if you like, across. But there is, I mentioned earlier, considering there's going to be a new wave of engineers coming in or workers coming in who are very much comfortable with this environment, which helps to change the working environment to some degree. So bringing those kind of digital natives in alongside those with the deeper manufacturing experience and working in teams together is really important, helping one another, because you need to share the manufacturing knowledge. It's not just about the technology solutions, it's about understanding the processes that you're trying to automate. It's really important with those individuals who are much more comfortable in fact, probably programming a robot than they are operating a machine tool or an assembly process. But we've done quite a lot of work on technology skills forecasting. So we look at technology development, but also the technology itself is of little value without the skills to operate and develop and program it. So, we need schemes in place, and we're starting to look at these as well, of how we do the translation of the current workforce skills across. I think making it, helping workers design the solutions and not do it onto your teams and your staff. So an important part is not a direct answer to how to do the skills. There's lots of training we can put in place to develop the skills in existing manufacturing operators and engineers. But I think it's really important to bring the teams on board who will be using and developing the skills in designing the solutions. So co-development and co-design is really important. Alongside that, then there's lots of training that can be offered. But I think if they feel people are part of the solution designing it, then it's an easier thing to land. But again, this cross-functional teams integrating the digital natives coming through with the experienced old hands, I think is a useful thing to do as well.
We have a question from John, which perhaps the other panelists might like to address in terms of the skill side, which is, do any of the panelists have examples of how automation has allowed a redeployment of staff in a company to hire skilled work? Do you want to quickly run round and see if you could comment on that, and maybe start with Bernard?
Yeah, you can start with me, not a problem. I mean, I was reading through all the questions.
Yeah.
I saw that one, and I thought, yeah, should I respond or should I wait and see if it comes up? But so we have one. I mentioned during the first question that we have this thing called customer stories, which is an internal system to allow people to see what's been done before. And one of them is a company called ZND that make barriers for all events. You'll have seen them everywhere. Barriers that are brazed rather than welded. They're all galvanized for outside use. And we as a supplier, work with an Italian system partner to automate their process. Their productivity just went through the roof. But what it did is it made them much more competitive in the market, and they sold a lot more. They gained more business, and they redeployed the guys that were hand brazing onto the robots. So these guys now are technicians within the plant rather than just welders, because anyone on this panel will tell you a robot is great with vision, with all the control systems, with everything you've got, but you still need somebody who understands the process, because we're way off that now. And that's a clear example, and I'm quite happy to share the story with everyone after the event. I'll send it round. There's a nice video. There's a good explanation of before and after. So that's one example that I can give you.
Lovely. David, could we have a quick comment from you on that one?
Yeah, brilliant. I think I'd like to position SMC a little bit first. So lots of people might associate SMC with pneumatics. Personally, I have very little to do with pneumatics. So we're very much an automation company in the current marketplace, because we follow the market trends. So yeah, I'm day to day, I'm working with electric actuators, serial comms on field bus and products like that. So we're even doing linear transfers for cobots and robots. And one of the key points of automation is to get over what we call the 3Ds. You'll hear this a lot with robotics, is the dirty, dangerous, or dull jobs. So you can reskill those workers away from those jobs, as Bernard said, into being technicians for your automated product lines. So you're upskilling them and getting rid of those 3Ds, the dirty, dangerous, dull jobs.
I guess it's still hard to make a numerical comparison, though, isn't it, between
it's always
how
hard
many
to.
you have on a manual production line compared to how many you would need to upskill.
Yeah, typically though, we do find you don't lose staff. You quite often can gain staff. You're getting a higher throughput, and you're just you're keeping your people. You're using them for different jobs, but they're doing what they're there to do. You're getting them away from those 3Ds, and they're doing their job well.
Yeah, point well made, John. Do you want to add something to that issue and how vision systems could contribute, and maybe we could take that kind of new technologies in the vision area at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of like very building on what David said, really, like where you've got very repetitive tasks, even very hard task for a human to be consistent as well. And often there may be like challenges in terms of keeping consistency with these types of operators. So we just worked with a large medical device company, and we redeployed about 20 staff, and none of those staff lost their roles. They were all redeployed, and actually some of them went into the quality department, and they were doing different things. They were analyzing images, building databases of images, improving their quality standards, and they had a much richer job because they were able to contribute to improving the quality of the company in a different way, rather than sat on the end of a production line physically checking a part, a package, a kit. And that much more stimulating to sort of look and get involved in the macro quality within the company environment as well. So that was I think a really nice example.
And I think it was Bernard alluded to some really kind of exciting new developments in the vision sphere. What would you like to say about that briefly?
In the vision, I would say there's lots of exciting developments. I mean, probably two to mention would be the kind of the merge really of what we class. I mean, vision's been around since the early 80s. Cognex has been around since then, and what it's been is really what's called rule-based vision. So you get a vision tool, an algorithm to look at measuring an object, or how large is an object, what's the pattern, what's the presence, what's the absence, and it's very much rule-based system. And what deep learning's done is enabled like a non-rule-based, very human brain-like approach to looking at an image and detecting what's in the image. So we can use this sort of very much it's non-linear. So for example, if you said like I think a really good example is like when a human recognizes a house could be a bungalow, it could be a flat, it could be many different shapes and sizes, but we know what it is. And deep learning is like that. You teach it by images, and you build up a library, and then you build a model, and then the model is deployed and can be deployed effectively on a production line very reliably. And also you can get quality data out. So for example, we're working with an automotive company inspecting leather, the surface of leather, and wrinkles and creases and all these things. It's a very it's a very challenging substance to work with. But by learning by example, learning like a person does, it's able to do it repeatedly, and also you could adapt the quality output of what's there. So what is good to one person might not be good to another person. So it's getting these sort of quality standards within the system as well, and building that in. So that's one. And then I would say as well 3D. So 2D imaging's been around and for a long time, a lot of developments there, but 3D is really merging in. So we're seeing like 3D smart cameras, for example, where you can build an application, you can measure in a non-contact way, non-invasive way, very accurately and very quickly. So there, I think those two are key and nice recent innovations.
And finally, but not least, Damien, you kind of have a more of an overview of all these areas of technology. So
yeah, I think I mean, picking up on a comment that John made about automation and the role it plays in kind of replacing those, you know, repeat mundane tasks that that we see out there in industry. I think we've seen an awful lot of our OEM customers and integrators who do a lot of their own control panel build as well, where we've come across, you know, some really highly skilled engineers spending an awful lot of time doing tasks like, you know, cutting out holes in control panels. And we've invested in technology at Rotico in a laser cutting machine to allow us to supply control panels directly to customers with those cutouts already made, to take, you know, the pressure away from their own engineers, you know, having to do tasks like that, and focus their time instead on engineering and solving their customers' problems. So that's, you know, there's a lot of examples out there of engineers who are doing those kind of basic assembly kind of tasks that, you know, that they should really be outsourcing to their suppliers and focusing on core engineering and providing value to their customers. So we do see that a lot.
Brilliant. Okay, I might try to involve Tony at this point if he's willing to. He's on the call as a panelist and he's editor of Drives and Controls. The number of questions coming in, I'm now officially swamped. Probably for the first time in this series, we've got 23 unanswered chat points and quite a few questions. I wondered if Tony would like just to point, you know, to pick out 2 or 3 questions that he thinks are, you know, particularly interesting, that we could cover, if that's okay. John's just recently brought in the AI machine learning side, but perhaps not. Oh, there he is in real life. Look, you're an expert on this, so you know, if you've picked out a few things, that would be great, I think, to steer the conversation.
One of the problems is the questions are so wide ranging, and some are very specific and some are very general. One thing, just going back to the use cases, somebody raised the question of IP.
Yes,
and
that was Mitsubishi Electric.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, because I think that is one of the problems with use cases is first of all IP, and secondly getting the permission of the end user to divulge information about their activities. So it may be worth discussing how you deal with those sorts of problems when you're looking at use cases.
Shall we start with Damien on that one and rotate and see what you think about, you know, divulging IP? Yes, I mean that's.
Yeah, I mean, I can only really speak more from an internal case study perspective, but certainly we have struggled with, you know, we've done some significant projects with customers where they've been, you know, nervous about having their name tagged to that out in the public domain, because obviously it's a very competitive market, and you know, customers, companies that we deal with don't want their competitors getting an edge on them by understanding that the latest technology that they've invested in or what they've done to make their machine go quicker or be more productive. So I think we absolutely do struggle with that. I think what we do try and do is through, you know, kind of non-disclosure agreements, we try and keep a pool of resource internally to allow us to kind of share knowledge and best practice internally of which you know, which companies and customers are working well in particular sectors, and be able to, like I say, make referrals or connections, you know, from a networking point of view, and put various companies in touch with each other without actually directly referencing a case study or an application. So yeah, it is certainly a challenge, and I think in this digital age, people are a lot more protective of their IP and keeping their trade secrets to themselves. So yeah, it's certainly a challenge we've seen.
Thank you. John, would you like to add to that? Is that a problem you see? I know we do from a technical journalism point of view, that it's very difficult sometimes to put names to faces, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very sensitive to our customers' needs, for one, and you know, further to Damien's comment, really, we see a lot of NDAs, and we have to work with very, you know, sensitive applications. I mean, the key thing really is that, like, this technology and automation can be a competitive advantage for a business. So having an IP, and their IP, I mean, it's not for example, it's not a product, it could be a process, the way that they're doing it, the way that they're applying the technology, and they may want to use that as a competitive advantage. So we're supportive of that. Some really large companies are very open, and yeah, that they would happily share and want the marketplace and want their peers to know how they're improving the quality of their products. But on the other hand, we've got extremely sensitive customers and sensitive applications. So there's no one size fits all. It's very much on, you know, like, yeah, kind of really discussing, consulting with the client and mapping their needs out. So yeah, it is a topic and an interesting one.
Okay, and David, please.
Yeah, okay. I think we're all going to be saying similar things to this one.
Yeah. Well, that's right. That's fine. Yeah. If you've got something you want to add, fine. I mean, otherwise we can.
Yes, of course. SMT will be. Yeah. We have NDAs with lots of our customers. You know, you have to be sensitive of IP. Sometimes.
I mean, one of my thoughts was the technical transfer side of it is important there, because people will be less sensitive to share with non-competitive organisations than people producing the same things that they are. You know, and that may be a way forward. It doesn't help when you're trying to promote things in the press. You know, I always say, you can speak to me, I'm a journalist, but it doesn't always work. But you know, that if you're dealing privately and you can share information between different sectors, that can be quite good.
John touched on an interesting point there, where it's not necessarily the solution. Maybe they're doing something in a slightly different way, and that's something we've been talking a lot about at SMC as well, where we're changing almost the status quo of how something's done. So I talked about the rotary tables and wireless solutions earlier, and maybe the status quo is to put all your machinery outside the table so that you don't have to worry about the rotating table. But with the use of wireless, you can start putting those devices on the table, you know, saving your machine footprint. But there's an element where you've got to convince, you know, the engineers who are designing these things to start thinking a little bit differently. And sometimes a success story can help with that, but you do have to be careful of sharing someone's success when they don't want it out there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Can I just say something, Andy?
Yes.
I think what our industries need to do is take a leaf out of the pharmaceutical industry's book. They share all information. They don't care. It's all open, you know. All they want is a solution, and they share all their resources. And probably when you're looking at what we've gone through over the last 12 to 18 months, it's a great example of how, you know, not guarding your so-called secrets is a way to accelerate, you know, rather than hold back.
Because everyone benefits.
Perfectly, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we've still got, you know, vaccine nationalism and all kinds of problems popping up, but in terms of technological development, I think they have shown the way, haven't they? Which has been really good. So while you're on, Bernard, the next question I was going to bring forward was, we had a batch of questions from Samir, and some of these we won't be able to take because of the sheer numbers, but I've picked the one about robotics and AI, which we touched on a little bit earlier. Robotics is mostly based on control algorithms. The question would be, how much will AI affect robotics?
Well, it's already affecting it hugely. You know, if you look at, I'll pick one example, micro fulfillment centers that are popping up all over the planet. You know, they're all based on artificial intelligence driving the systems, you know, right the way from orders coming in from the customers through to delivery of the systems, through to the robots that supply the equipment internally. I think that's why I said earlier about the vision combined with the AI is going to completely revolutionise, and it's going to make using automation much simpler. Going on behind it is really complicated and complex, but you, me, and everybody else, we don't need to worry about that. We just need to use it. You know, if you take the example of your iPhone, you know, all the applications that you can just download, and it's because it's completely open. And I think that's what we're going to see with automation, regardless of brand or, you know, product. It's going to happen in a big way.
Excellent. There are questions on different types of robots as well. One which I've seen and one which I haven't, but I've heard about. So just a supplementary from Samir. Do you believe that automation will move towards a kind of swarm mode, or can we expect that single robot units will dominate the market? And the second one is perhaps on more familiar territory, which is about cobots. From Deepak, who says, you know, are cobots a potential game changer in the field of industrial automation? How confident are we that our industries to deploy collaborative robot applications? And somewhere else in this swarm of messages, it was there was a simple one that said, "Are cobots safe?"
Well, I think that's a really big subject, but I'll answer it very simply. There is no such thing as a collaborative robot. There's only a collaborative application, because if you think you can just buy a robot and use it for whatever you want, then you're kidding yourself. So, but the answer to the question is they are a game changer, because they've opened the mindset of people that have never used robots before. But there's a lot of guff talked about cobots. We're all involved. Every manufacturer supplies a cobot, including us. But you need to be very careful. The very first thing that you need to concern yourself with, and everyone on the panel will know, is safety. And that is paramount. So I think, you know, we're seeing more and more robots that are being branded as cobots. It's a kind of a buzzword, if you like, but the reality is you have to think about the complete application. And then what you'll find most of the time is that with Rutico's equipment, with SMC's equipment, with Cognex's equipment, you can use a standard industrial robot and operate it in the same way. And you don't have any of the downsides of, you know, the speed and force limitations. So it's an open discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. So we're seeing a lot of cobot requirements applications coming in at SMC, but we find a lot of the time people go down the cobot route, you know, and we start talking to them about end of arm tooling for the cobot, but then they realize that actually they want to go faster. They want more performance from the cobot, so end up running it in a non-collaborative mode anyway and putting it in a safety cage or a safety device. And yeah, that is happening 80 to 90% of the time at the moment.
I think just one last thing, sorry to butt in, David, one last thing. I did refer to it earlier on. The one company, which I'm not going to mention for obvious reasons, but they were the people that started this whole process off over 10 years ago. What they've done is made people realize that, you know, it's ease of use that's the most important thing with anything, with a robot, with anything you buy, it's ease of use. Mm-hmm. You can deploy it quicker. Whether that's collaborative or industrial doesn't really make a heap of difference. And I think the other thing to really bring to everyone's attention is there are so many studies that show that a human and a robot working together is the best combination. You know, we're not going to end up all sitting at home watching the telly while the robots do our work. You know, it's not going to happen. You need what's in between our ears to help, you know, solve all the complicated issues that are out there that robots just will not be able to do.
What's your take on it, Damien?
I think just a couple of points there for me, Andy. I think just quickly, I haven't got too much to add from the AI point of view, but just to plug a product, Rockwell Automation have just released a Logix AI module, which is really exciting and interesting, actually. And obviously, there's some real demand coming through now for companies to start using AI in automation. So I will share something in the chat just on that for anybody that wants to read more on that. But just picking up on a point that Bernard made, actually, well, two things. One about safety, in particular, being the biggest challenge that we've seen when talking about cobots and the use of in certain applications. And obviously, safety is something that always seems to kind of open a bit of a can of worms. And we have lots of expertise within Rutico around safety and in the industrial environment, and we've had some very challenging conversations around cobots and safety. So that's certainly something we've seen. But I just wanted to pick up on a point, if I may, about Bernard made around seeing robots and robotics in lots of different sectors, if you like. And I think we would all, visualize robots on the end of automotive production lines doing welding, and there's a lot of kind of stereotypical robot applications. But I just wanted to share an application I came across recently, and being a Suffolk born and bred individual, this one was particularly interesting to me because it was in the agricultural sector, and there was a big thing in the local media I saw recently about the first robotic tractor being purchased by a company in Ipswich a couple of months ago, and it stemmed from an issue around getting labour to actually go out in the fields and do weeding of organic crops, because you can't use fertilisers and chemicals for obvious reason if you're trying to grow organic vegetables. And there's this company in Italy that have produced the Robotics 150, which is a 150 horsepower robotic tractor that runs on GPS and an intelligence and automation system to go around weeding farmers' fields. And it's a really interesting application. But of course, you just don't think of robots in, doing a job that used to be done by Bob, who used to pull weeds out of fields. So I think we're starting to see a lot more applications in different areas of industry starting to adopt robotics and automation. I think that's really exciting.
Thank you. John, do you have any quick comments on that? And then I'm going to bring in Sam for some background information on our recent discussions and one or two of the future questions that have come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one example that I just wanted to mention, really, which was where we're seeing like deep learning working with robotics. We've just done quite an interesting a multinational project where it's basically large excavator and construction equipment, which is not a sector that we operate in, but there's very much complex human-made assemblies with cable harnesses on, all sorts of hydraulic and mechanical connectors on, and each assembly has got something like 150 inspection points. The robot whizzes around this, and it uses learned images from the AI to check each point, and it can cope with, this operator may have put the cable in a certain direction, or it may be a low light day, it may have bad contrast on a certain image, or the nut might be in a different position, but it knows all those variances, and the time to integrate is so much shorter now. So the possibilities, what you can do with a robot plus a vision system, the game's changed. There's always limitations, but what's happening now is that the possibilities are accelerating, and these things are becoming easier to do in the field, which is kind of like, it's a nice kind of bit of serendipity of like all these forces coming together and enabling the technology.
Thank you. Right, Sam, it's time for some curveballs. I appreciate your kind of background on what you've been listening to, but also some of the questions that are coming in, I think, quite interesting. And I'm just going to take them in a little group. First of all, does our discussion mean that organisations are struggling with putting together a business case? It can't be that simple, otherwise it would be easier to develop, is a point. Then we have a question, what are the developments or opportunities in the robotics field in medical industry, like surgery, which is another kind of technology transfer area, I guess. And thirdly, and I'm not sure how to file this one, but there's been a couple of questions about third world applications for automation and what our take is on that. And what the opportunities are. So that just is some ideas that have come in through the chat. And if I can throw those at you.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, curveballs. The business case one, first of all, I think the business case can be, I mean, the guys are more experienced with having, be dealing with these, but it can be quite straightforward if it's about automation to improve productivity. You've got a clear forecast on workload, etc. That's easy to write. I think what we're talking about here is suites of technologies now that are advancing quite quickly, and the hype curve, I suppose, that Bernard's talking about with cobotics, or is it swarm robotics? There's genuine advances in technologies now and you know, the AI and the vision systems that mean we can actually apply robotic automation to a wider range of applications, a wider range of use cases, not just productivity improvement. So the flexibility thing we've touched on a couple of times becomes really interesting. You know, improving your market position potentially. So the range, I think, the complexity of solutions available to us now, I mean, there's a wider range of applications for automation. Sometimes the business case isn't quite as straightforward to build, and I think we need to help companies understand the opportunity and helping to construct those business cases. So the advances we're seeing genuinely present new opportunities that, you know, there is real substance behind the hype. And looking at, I've heard about a cobot, or I want to go and look at swarm robotics, what can you give me? Whereas you need to start with what's the business need, where do the solutions meet that need? Then you can find a business case. So if it's business need led, the business case is easy to write, I think. Surgery, the medical world, well, there's a range of, I mean, surgery itself, so I mean, the technology's there for many applications, isn't it? The question is, who wants to go first, I guess, under the robotic knife? So the quality assurance is crucial. We talked about skills in the manufacturing world, and actually, I think automation helps with some of the demographic changes. This touches, in fact, I'll come back to the surgery question in a minute because this links into the third world thing as well. We were talking about examples of upskilling earlier, and I see examples of not direct upskilling, but just demographic changes. So I see examples in the food and drink sector where actually the unskilled labour, the transient labour is not available anymore post, Brexit and things that has impacted on the availability of cheap labour. And there's a move for some companies to try and put automation in place and actually looking to longer term but higher skilled roles in food and drink, and looking at things like applications where currently find engineers who are going around troubleshooting problems all the time in firefighting, but automation not just on the shop floor but actually in the manufacturing engineering design process, and more of the AI type solutions are freeing up capacity to work on the process, not just fixing the process, and bringing through, instead of spending a decade or so training apprentices on polishing and grinding operations, those same staff can come through and start programming robots and delivering them much quicker than they could if they were learning the traditional methods. So it helps with demographic changes rather than just replacing existing skills. So in the third world applications, I think the interest is going to be not just about the cost of the labour versus the cost of automation. It's about being able to do things where you're embedding the skills and the intelligence into the automation systems rather than relying on skilled labour. So actually, an application of automation in the third world, perhaps, is more around building processes at scale rather than having to spend a long time training skills for manual operations and the expertise that comes with decades of practice. So in the surgery, there's a real challenge around replacing surgeons, I think. There'll be a lot of pushback on that from the surgeons and the patients. The technology is there. I think assisted technology is where we're going to see it first and foremost. So in the theatre, and there's a real opportunity to use that to, help in terms of vision systems and projections, to be clear, we're not making mistakes, leaving things behind. And, so a quality control, I think, is the first step for automation. But moving to automation actually in surgery, it will come. I think vision systems first. I think cooperative robotics, but full automation will come in time. But that's more of a kind of is the community, both in terms of surgeons and patients, ready for that yet? But the technology is getting there quickly. But I think there'll be a lead in before full automation.
Lovely. Thank you for that. We're coming to the end of our time, and I think you can see that if we did this again tomorrow, we would have a completely different program to address, and there are masses and masses of unanswered questions which we will deal with in our established method of talking outside the actual webinar itself, and getting some of these onto threads in our LinkedIn pages. But I'm going to give everybody a chance to justify themselves to finish, with another curveball, obviously, and then we'll pass to Sam just to finally sum up, which should take us round to actually about 90 minutes. So there was Matt who had his hand up very early, but his question is a curveball, and I'm going to throw it at Bernard first, purely because he's covered some of it already, and it gives the others a little bit of thinking time too. And it says, it could be suggested that the conservatism of your collective product and service development and offering is not delivering anything other than slow and steady technological advancement. Reflecting on the challenges of the pandemic, what are you doing differently to accelerate technology adoption? So I think you've kind of introduced some thoughts about that, so perhaps reinforce those and then ask the others to comment.
Yeah, I think to give you a clear and present example, our current operating system is called KRL, KUKA Robot Language, and it's based on monolithic code, you know, and we are now moving with our new system to a completely updated, completely open architecture, allowing external APIs to communicate directly, as I mentioned, with the iPhone, you know, with an ecosystem built around the system. So that's how we're changing, you know, and I think linking this to Sam Turner, the thing is that the engineers and the PhD students that are going through all the universities, the STEM centers, etc., they're all trained in the latest, like Java coding, and you know, and that's where everyone needs to be. So as a big Germanic, huge company, we are moving as fast as we possibly can. That every single robot that we supply will be based on that new operating system, ease of use and open architecture to allow external partners to join, and including the 3 partners that are underneath me on here. So that's how we're addressing that issue.
Yeah, and you made the point about how the pandemic has enabled people to work together, which obviously has accelerated technology adoption as well. David, would you like to come in and add anything for that?
Yeah, it's a very wide-reaching question, isn't it? It's, you know, we as the companies have a role to help push the industry forward, but really we're having to ask them what they want. So a big thing that SMC does is we do what we call voice of customer surveys, and that's to find out what does the industry want at the moment. You know, and sometimes we'll bring a concept to them and ask them on their thoughts and which direction they might want to take it. So, for example, recently we did a voice of customer on data connectivity, where we were talking about things like OPC UA. It sort of feeds back into your AI question as well, where you're getting data. How do you want to get that data out of your machine into the cloud or whatever system, so that you can process that data, so that your AI can make intelligent solutions with it? But yeah, it's all industry driven, really. The only thing we can do is show a feature and what benefits it might bring, so that we're highlighting that to the end users and they can decide how they want to use it, whether they want to use it.
Thank you very much. John?
Yeah, just to build on the other comments, really, like this term simplified complexities, like used, and we use it. We're really trying to build interoperability with a vision system, so it's not a standalone system. It can easily, so we work really hard on building like software connectivity, for example, that would talk straight to a KUKA robot. When you connect it to a KUKA robot, you can guide a part, you can do an application really simply and really fast and really effective. So we build that communication protocol. The same if we're talking to an SMC Valve Island via Ethernet IP. The same if we're then, and what we're seeing as well, this digitalization story, is that there's a lot of like big company systems like MES systems, for example, where they want to use data, so it becomes usable, it's information. So that what they start to ask for is very much like IT related type of systems and protocols, for example, like edge intelligence, MQTT. We'll be linking through to SCADA. Then the next moment we're talking to a PLC. So we've been thrown these challenges of all this varied automation equipment to really kind of build a scalable architecture that a customer can use easily and manage the system, so it delivers value, like not just as an isolated piece of equipment, but as part of a whole company system.
Thank you, John. Damien, it falls to you to conclude this little element.
Just maybe a slightly different point of view, because obviously as the distributor and having the luxury of having all of the esteemed brands that are here today, KUKA, SMC, Cognex, all within the Roseco portfolio, I think we have a very strong message to our industrial customers that we're able to go out and talk to them about any applications, any business challenges that they may have, and then whether it's solved with a vision system, a pneumatic solution, or a robot, or all three together on a bespoke line, that's something that we can add value to. I think just picking up on a point David made actually about data and cloud and some of those key points, I think I wouldn't say we're doing this differently, because we've been promoting it for quite a long time. But I think one of the obvious things that we've seen due to the COVID pandemic is the absolute reliance over the last 18 months on the need to have good remote access, where we've all been forced to work from home, and we locked down those machine builders and end users that built remote access into their lines, and their machines are able to continue to function relatively well by having that interface there in place. And of course, it used to be a lot more of an option and something that we would champion from a remote diagnostics kind of perspective. But now I think remote access is an absolute given that needs to be considered very early on in the specification of any project or system that's being worked on. So that's something we've seen an obvious kind of increase in through the COVID pandemic.
Thanks. I mean, I get an image of not a slow and steady technological advancement, but actually an accelerating opportunity, looking at more and more opportunities with technologies that themselves are all developing and learning to work together. So I see it as a hugely promising and essential area for manufacturing. So over to you, Sam, for a little summing up, and then we'll have reached our 90-minute section, and I'll wind up.
Thanks, Andy, and everybody. I mean, fantastic discussion and set of questions there, and enjoyed the curveballs as well. I mean, it's hard to sum up all of that discussion, isn't it? But the things I'd reflect on from what we've just discussed, and the last subject around is this, a slow march of technology, or is there? And I think your point is it's an acceleration of technology innovation, maybe not a revolution, but an acceleration of the pace of technology innovation, which means new opportunities are opening up for the application of automation that perhaps haven't been thought about conventionally. And I think we need to help companies understand what's available and how it can help solve the use cases. So rather than companies coming forward, manufacturers saying, I want to automate, it's looking, what are your business challenges right now? Or what's, both in terms of fixing problems, but also opportunities where you're trying to take your business. And then can we demonstrate how the suites of technologies we've got around us can help to address those challenges and opportunities? So I think matching the rapidly accelerating solutions to the range of business opportunities they can now meet is really important, and demonstrating those. I think educating workforce on what automation is in its many forms will help to kind of identify those opportunities. So thinking about what can I see, as people understand intimately the company, the work environment they're working in, what's available to me to help to automate, improve performance. That will help create business case as well, and helps that skills transition if we can do some awareness training at scale across manufacturers. I think interoperability is a really important point, because it is a suite of solutions we're talking about here, and it can be seen to be a barrier in terms of the cost of interfacing with bespoke solutions. But addressing all those things in demonstrating environments, and come back to kind of what we do as the day job in the Catapult, I think is useful. So we can help to test and de-risk those solutions as well. There's a thing at the moment being run through Made Smarter Innovation Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund around digital innovation hubs and test beds. We've been running a pilot on this, which is an environment to develop and test solutions quickly in a new environment, and also de-risk and integrate solutions and demonstrate them. So looking at real industry use cases and a suite of solutions to address those, and the technology transfer you talked about earlier, Andy. There's going to be a rollout of these nationally later this year. We're hoping we'll be involved with Atrium Catapult, but check out the stuff we're doing on pilot test beds. But I think collaboration is key. and really educating on what automation now means in terms of the business opportunity it drives is crucial.
Excellent. Well, that sums it up for today. Thank you for all those who attended. Hope you found it useful. We're very keen on feedback, things we can do better, subjects that we might cover. So we'll be asking everyone about that. And also for our panelists, as they know, we'll have a debriefing session in a few minutes, which is a separate meeting. But we'll give you 10 minutes for a coffee, and I'll go and unmuzzle the blackbirds, and then we'll get into that. But I hope you found it really useful. If you want to see it again, it'll be up online in a couple of days, and also for people who weren't able to attend or people who discover about it subsequently. And with so many questions, I'm sorry we couldn't answer all of them in the time available, but we will provide answers, either individual panelists talking to individual questioners or collectively on our LinkedIn pages. So we'll deal with all of that. And so once again, thank you ever so much for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.